Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back for EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Last week we didn't get that much news when it comes to development of EVE Online. We did get another EVE Pulse video announcing visual updates for the moons, and of course in the next patch we should also see the Frigate Escape Bay make its way to TQ, which I think does change the battleship dynamic quite a little bit. I think it's going to be interesting to see if Nullsec can have some really cool fights, and if someone can find a very cool meta combination with helpful frigates that can basically help them in battle. I think it's going to be rather interesting. On the co-incorporated front, we are war decked again. So this is kind of weird. I think I can show this to you guys. You can see Concord invalidated the war, and then Domain Research and Mining Institution redeclared war to the lone Space Wolves. So we're back in for another week. They spend another 100 million to restart the war. Well, that's fine by me. I'm actually getting a lot of help, a lot of support, lots of intel is coming in through the viewers and things like that. It's super interesting. At the moment, I am not too worried. As I've said, I follow rule number 1 in EVE Online pretty religiously. So let's move on to the New Eden store. Another part of the EVE Pulse was focusing on the new Gila skins, and so here they are. We've got a Gila Abyssal Darkfield skin, Exostorm skin, and let's see if we can spot a few others. Thought there were more, but not really seeing that. Oh, and it's loading pretty slowly. Alright, so we get a couple new Gila skins. Other than that, I'm not spotting any sales or anything like that right away. I think this one, Darkfield, does look pretty cool. It has that effect, which, if I'm not mistaken, with loyalty points from the Triglavians, DD loyalty points, though, you can buy one that has skins that have this type of an effect as well on the Triglavian ships themselves. So I kind of think it's interesting. I just haven't really been grinding that much LP lately to try and get them, but that's also one of my medium-term goals. I guess that means we can move on to the market, the reason why everyone is here, of course, and as always we'll start with some plex and stuff coming in at 2:30. Like that. So let's get started on that plex chart here. You can see a little bit of a dip back down to less than 3.25 million on the chart, very close to a 1-year low point. You can clearly see the hesitation now from December all the way up to March at this point, where we're basically flat for the plex market. I really thought we'd see a turnaround when FanFest would get closer and closer, but of course now that the FanFest has been cancelled, I'm not really sure what plex is going to do. It will all depend, I think, at this point on how CCP is going to announce the stuff that they have prepared for FanFest, which in the latest EVE Pulse was also mentioned that we should see more from CCP Burger. I'm sure that they're basically having quite a lot of fun finding cool ways to get us all of that new information. So I look forward to that. I think we could be in for a couple of interesting weeks, especially the closer we get to April, the day that FanFest was supposed to start. So let's take a look at the markets themselves. Just above 3.2 million in 3.3 million, excuse me, in GTA 4.4, around 3.2 million for the buyers, and if we go to the player-owned trade hubs, it's just above 3.3 million as well. Pretty narrow margin between the trade hubs and GTA, and then for the buyers, I'm sure we'll stay pretty close to 3.2 million exactly. That is just the situation. Very, very narrow margin. 3.2 million for the buyers, 3.3 million for the sellers, and the price, well, in the last couple of days we've been below 3.25, which means that it's actually the buyers that are winning out at the moment. There's more people dumping the plex right away to 3.2 million rather than selling it at 3.3. Or successfully, I should say. Next up, we have the multiple pilot training certificate. On the chart, we're flat as well. That is finally starting to show the same pattern as plex, which I think is normal. We had this massive sale where we jumped from 2 million all the way down to less than 1.5 billion. It took us quite a while to absorb all of these volumes. You can see that the trade volume stayed high. We stayed below 1.5 billion for quite a bit. Now in one and a second jump we went to 1.63 billion on the chart, and this apparently is a little bit more normal considering the plex prices as well. Volumes are down to what I would call normal volumes at a decent price as well. So in the sell prices, 1.65 billion of course for the trading certificates, buyers are going up slowly as well, up to almost 1.6 billion. Very narrow margin here again. Basically the market has found its price range and we're really in that hesitation phase. Everything is decently flat. For the skill extractors we should expect something pretty similar. Yep, a little bit of a dip at the tail end, going below 380 million on the average price, and well, sellers are going down as well. 371 million for the sellers of skill extractors. Buyers are at 361. I think in the last couple of weeks there was a big difference between plex and the skill extractors. There was like a slight difference in their behavior, and I think skill extractors still had a larger margin. That's gone now. We're just down to like 10 million ISK on a 370 sell price. That's a pretty narrow margin here as well. So the hesitation, we can see that as well from December all the way to March here. Basically flat with no real direction for the skill extractors either. That means we get to move on to the skill injectors. Here are the large skill injectors, and we're again seeing that same hesitation with, well, you could call an anomaly, a jump up to 900 million ISK in December for the skill points. Did they release something with skill points? Oh, maybe the Dreadnought. That is possible. The new Triglavian Dreadnought is of course very powerful. Might have given us a boost in injector demand all of a sudden. But overall here, we're seeing that same pattern, especially in the last couple of weeks. We are basically flat above 800 million ISK. We are talking 827 million for the sellers and 800 million for the buyers. If you compare that, a 27 million ISK margin for an 800 million ISK item, it's pretty much in line with everything else. The margins are closing down and the prices are here. If you would be looking for one larger investment, I would say large scale injectors do look pretty interesting. The reason I really like them myself is because they have two components. Of course, they're made out of skill extractors, which is basically plex, and that's your hedge against monetary inflation in EVE Online. And you have the skill point component, which at the moment is clearly under pressure because CCP is giving out a lot of skill points through the skilling spree and all of that stuff, through different mechanics, also as rewards. If that were to end, then of course demand might pick up, and that might increase the value of the skill point part of these large skill injectors. It's a bit of a gamble together with an edge of inflation. I personally kind of like that combination. There's definitely potential there. After that, we have the small skill injectors. Same pattern again through February. We basically haven't moved, stayed below 170 million ISK. Couple of higher data points at the tail end, but not crossing that threshold just yet. Indeed, 168 million for most sellers. We're approaching JITA at 172, but again, narrow margin here as well. 159 million for the buyers, like less than 10 million between buyers and sellers. A little bit better than the skill extractor margin, but it's really not that large anymore either. Alright, that means we still have the daily alpha injectors to go through, and these are a little bit weirder for my personal taste, because you can clearly see that we started out at 70 million about a year ago. A high price, sure, but 60 million average was pretty normal for the daily alpha injectors. Then we got quite a couple of sales considering these volumes that brought the price down to a 30 to 40 million range, and I'm really surprised at how long we are staying in that range. I thought we would start to go up as that would dry up, but no, it's just not happening. Perhaps this sale here, it's bound to be a sale considering the volumes, which brought us back down to less than 30 million again, or hit 30 million. The 1 year low point was recent enough that we're just not pulling away from this just yet. And yeah, less than 40 million on the average, 41.5 million for the sellers, 37.5 million for the buyers. Again, very, very narrow margin at, well, relatively low prices, I have to say. This is also something, if you don't have really ISK to buy like 800 million ISK items, 40 million for a daily alpha injector is doable. It's pretty low on the chart at the moment. One thing to keep in mind, of course, this this is a different market. Daily alpha injectors are restricted to the alpha clone player base and are directly created by buying these from CCP. So it doesn't have that that component either, where at least the skill points have to be made by players and then extracted through a skill extractor in order to create the large skill injectors. No, these are in fact created from thin air. And then finally we've got the hypercores that is continuing to hover in the 350,000 ISK range. It's 340 now for most sellers, 350 in JITA, and 329,000 in the for the buyers. So again, really narrow margin. That is the name of the game in the plex stuff category for this week. All margins have narrowed, lots of hesitation in the market, and I personally really don't know what to expect, because of course where we should have had a FanFest now, we'll probably have interesting announcements and things like that, but will it be able to drum up the same type of hype that a FanFest with a trailer, with a roadmap would have generated? That's gonna be the real challenge, I think. Alright, we move on to the mineral market, coming in at 11 minutes. 11 minutes, there we go. As always, we'll start with titanium, and the ticker below will have confirmed this. We're stable just below 8 ISK, which is a 1-year high point and definitely a great price for titanium. I'm a little bit surprised to see that the volumes are not picking up. I thought we would see a lot more dumping, but I guess that the drought is starting to be felt here. We do have one sell order that's coming in the meantime at 758, but you can see that most sellers are coming in just below 8 ISK, and yeah, these volumes are not that great. 200 million units, 200 here. You know, back in the day, whenever we had a bit of a bump during the Rorcal heights, you would see 2 billion units being sold in a single order and things like that to crash the price down very quickly. Here it's just not happening. Much lower volume, so apparently the lower availability is being felt here. And 8 ISK for titanium, not bad. I think your ISK per hour, even in high sec, when it comes to Velspar, is looking up by a decent margin. And then the buyers are coming in at 757. That's actually pretty high as well. To be buying titanium at more than 7.5 ISK, we have not seen that in a decently long time. Next up, we've got pyrite. Same thing right here, jumping to the 7 in between 7 and 8 ISK on the chart, and able to stay there as well. 764 for the sellers, 716 for the buyers. Decently narrow margin, 7.5 ISK for pyrite, which was actually doing really badly. This used to be more expensive than titanium. Now it's at least competing for that price range. And look at this 1-year chart, started below 4 ISK and is selling for almost 8 now. That is of course pretty good, although yeah, as I was saying, 4 ISK was historically low, was really a terrible price for pyrite. Also looking at the volumes here, 60 million, 80 million, 156 million. These are slightly better, but this is the stuff that we used to see whenever the price shot up a little bit. 2 billion units being sold in one order down here as well. Quite a few more of these. It looks like smaller volumes are now able to compete and are competing for the price ranges. And so these massive dumps, I'm not really sure how long people will be able to keep those going. In titanium, it really looks like that is gone. Let's maybe browse down a little bit as well. Here we've got a 1.5 billion, but at 810 almost. That's yeah, quite a premium price. So all of this is where the competition happens, but we're apparently oscillating pretty easily to a price above 8 ISK here. After that, we have the Mexelon market that is doing alright as well. Went to a 1-year high point of above 70 ISK right on the changes, the resource changes that CCP announced. And now we are flat at the high end of the chart. I would say 65 probably. Yeah, it's 66, 37 for the sellers and 65 ISK for the buyers. And those buyers being forced up is definitely a change of pace. And that is because of the change in volumes here as well. 5 million units, 15 million units. That's really not that much Mexelon to be bringing to the market. I think that in the high days and the low prices, the flooded mineral markets, volumes like this, 100 million units, 106 million units, was far more common. And now you can see that we are competing down these prices with much lower volumes all of a sudden. Yeah, there is less supply, prices have gone up. Pretty cool. Next up, we've got Isogen, another jump up, this time as well to a 1-year high point above 20 ISK. 21.85 for the sellers, 19.19 for the buyers. Again, decently low margins, and yeah, 5 million, 5 million, 4 million. That reminds me a lot of Zydrine, reminds me a lot of Morphite. These are the types of volumes that you could probably get out of like a moon mining cycle or something like that. And then the 71 million goes up to 22 ISK, 185 goes above 22.50. So you can see that those high volumes, they're still there. There's probably still quite a few reserves left in the market, but speculators are not just dumping everything at the slightest opportunity, being certain that they can replenish those reserves at very low prices as mining was really plentiful. A complete change in dynamic, very, very interesting. After that, we've got the Noxium market that also jumped up to 1-year high point of 450. That one is giving back quite a bit of that ground, staying just above 350 at this point. I think, well, it's 408 for the sellers, 374 for the buyers. So buyers are being forced up as well from this price range. So we've got a bit of upwards pressure coming in right here. And I think the volumes will be interesting as well. Oof, yeah, indeed. 500,000 units. 400,000 units. That is really not that much. We get 1.5 million sell order and 7 million, but again we're going up to 420, 415 pretty much for those higher volumes, 430 for the next high volume. Much more sparse. The competition is happening with much smaller volumes. Really cool stuff. Zydrine is next, and that one broke 600 ISK, is not able to maintain that, but is staying well away from that 500 ISK average we've seen throughout the year. It's at 595 for the sellers and 582 for the buyers. Again, that push up on a lack of supply is pretty obvious. The one thing that I don't expect to change too much here is that selling pattern: 2 million, 1 million, 2 million, 6 million, right? Again, stuff that you grab out of the moon mining cycles. After that, we get Megasite, did well to jump back up to 450. A bit of a surprise. Megasite used to be more expensive than Zydrine, is not able to break out that well. In fact, we started the year at 500 ISK, very similar to Zydrine. But we're actually at the moment still below that price range. 490 is coming into range though for the sellers, 444 for the buyers. Definitely a bit of a difference here where the buyers are not forced up as quickly, perhaps because it's been plentiful for a long time. It's also the least needed Tech 1 mineral, I'm gonna call them, in the market. That may be why we've got a delayed reaction for Megasite. If the drought continues for quite a bit longer and you still want to try to ride that wave, I would say Megasite is probably your only candidate to still make that happen. And then finally, we've got Morphite, of course, tied to the Tech 2 economy. I don't think you can get that from moon mining. So at the moment, it's doing really well. 1-year high point, double the price as well over a 1-year chart. Started at 7,500 ISK, 15k on the chart now, and it's 15,500 for the sellers, 14,500 for the buyers. Definitely a different dynamic here in margin. Immediately 1,000 ISK on a 15k price. Volume wise, I don't think that we're noticing anything that special. You still have 100,000 here, 100,000 there that are competing, point one-ing each other, which will probably end to 4. Yeah, so this will be in the tens of ISKs once the market change comes in here as well, which is going to be interesting times for Eve Talk as well. But right now, Morphite really strong. Of course, if we had bought at the low point of 7,500 ISK, you could be selling them for double the price right now. Not bad, but it's really interesting to me personally to see the mineral market shift like that. And of course, something that I had been saying in the last couple of months, maybe even a couple of years, is that a turnaround like this would require a CCP intervention, and that's exactly what we're seeing, of course, where they want the drought phase to happen in EVE Online. Let's move on to the PI market. That's coming in at 19 minutes. And see what's happening there. Last week we definitely got that feeling that the lack of demand is still a problem in the market and was pulling back some of the gains that we'd seen in the last couple of weeks. So let's get started. Here are the broadcast notes, and we can see a bit of pressure on the price through February. A little bit of a jump up, but coming from 1.8 million on the average price. We can clearly see that we're trading below average, less than 2 million for the sellers, less than 1.9 million for the buyers. And here I'm seeing a decent amount of buy prices. The sellers are not that over volumed, I would say. This is still pretty reasonable. New buyers, yeah, full page right here. So maybe this turnaround here was basically some aggressive buying coming in, trying to grab as close to 1.8 million as possible on these broadcast nodes. Bit of speculation. Look at the volumes though. These have been down substantially as the average price went down as well. So we're slowly recovering on the broadcast nodes, but we're staying well away from that 2 million average for our average prices. Construction blocks did really well to get back to that 11,000 ISK range. Last week we saw that we dipped below that again on a lack of demand. So it was decently good supply, but just not enough demand. And we're still seeing that pattern. Now sellers have been forced below 11,000 ISK, and the buyers, well, you can see this is it. Compared to all of these sellers, that is that very same pattern, and so construction blocks are now forced below their average price again, and I don't see any end to it unless all of a sudden demand picks back up. Consumer electronics have been struggling since fall and are still doing so, staying below 11,000 ISK on most days for the averages. 11,500 for the sellers, 10,700 for the buyers. And again, look at that difference. This is just JITA, by the way, for these sellers. So there's probably a couple of sell orders around here as well. And then these are the buyers in the trade hubs and in JITA itself. That's the whole list. So that's really the big difference. It is still just a lack of demand. Now, the latest buyers here have gone up to 10,700. That's a little bit closer to what we have as the normal margin, so we could finally see consumer electronics break that 11,000 ISK average at some point, but right now the pattern is clear. We're below average on a lack of demand. Coolant's starting to struggle as well. I mean, it's still above 11,000 ISK, which is a decently good price. 12,200 in fact for the sellers, but 10,900 for the buyers. And again, look at that difference. Here are our sellers. You can browse quite a little bit. These are our buyers. That is it. So this is again pulling the price back down on a margin of like 1,400 ISK, 1,300 ISK, which is quite a little bit actually for Coolants. And I'm hearing something outside, but let's hope that it doesn't come through too much. Cryoprotectant solutions recovering from a massive boost up to a 1-year high point, went up to 300,000 ISK. Of course, this is tied to the implant production. All new implants apparently need these cryoprotectant solutions. 210,000 still for the sellers, 190,000 for the buyers. There's definitely high demand for these at the moment. Because that's a pretty narrow margin for a price that's this much. That's pretty much double the normal average. So if you can somehow switch to cryoprotectant solutions, I do think your margins will be very healthy. Of course, you gotta be careful with flooding the market as well, trying to snag that opportunity. But right now, for the last couple of months, we've been doing really well and just building on strength. Here 170 probably, another 170, then a boost to 200, and then now another jump to 250 and 300,000 on a couple of days, probably on some massive purchasing. It is a very impressive chart, and it does make cryoprotectant solution production very attractive. So how long is it gonna last? Might not last that long, but right now it is pretty obvious that you're selling at a great price. And there's gonna be lots of demand here as well, of course. Enriched uranium, that is the opposite pattern again. 14,000 yearly average, definitely the case. You can see that we're quite a bit below that, around 13k, and it is 13,500 for the sellers. And you could expect, well, 12,800. That's actually a bit of a surprise here. Although we're seeing the same pattern with quite a few sellers and just not enough buyers. What I'm surprised by is in the last 24 hours, the buyers have been competing quite a bit from like 11,150, 12,500, 12,700, 12,800, and now they're still competing each other up, bidding each other up quite decently, closing the margin here to less than 1,000 ISK, which is actually not that much. So I'm starting to see some slight upwards pressure, but unfortunately the difference between supply and demand is still too great to actually push the average prices up enough. Integrity response draws next. That is something completely different. Did it happen last week? It should have. The first jump up here, and then we went up to apparently 3 million ISK for the integrity response zones. At the moment we're recovering from that. It's still 2.7 million for the sellers, 2.2 million for the buyers. Yeah, a very surprise jump in an advanced PI material that is currently trading at 2.7, which is of course well above average for these PI materials that have been very stable in the last definitely since the last summer or so. We've been looking for another structure announcement from CCP and it just has not materialized. That's why we're constantly being under pressure. This is a surprise. Look at the volume spike here as well. Definitely feels like someone is gambling on that still coming through all the announcements that were planned for FanFest. Mechanical parts back to the normal pattern, 10,000 ISK on the chart pretty much, 10,990, so below 11,000 for the sellers, 10,000 ISK for the buyers. That go down to 9.6, 9.5 and 9,000 very quickly. So again, same pattern. Not enough demand for all of that supply, and so we're slowly forced to close that gap by just putting more stuff on the market for ever cheaper prices. Organic mortar applicators also doing decently well. All of a sudden, slight increase in volumes for a couple of days bring the price to 1.1 million on the chart. It's 1.2 million for most sellers and almost 1.1 million for the buyers. And here we get a different pattern. Look at that, can browse in the sellers, can still browse in the buyers. So all of a sudden we do see a change in pattern here where we get less supply than demand. It is advanced PI materials. Kind of interesting. You look at this, you look at the integrity response zones, it does feel like people are starting to gamble on perhaps there will be an announcement. Maybe they're holding off from bringing their stuff to the market, hoping that they can make bank on whatever they're producing at the moment. There definitely seems to be some position taking that wants higher prices for, or expects higher prices for the advanced PI materials. Alright, then we get our robotics, and that is really bad, of course. 1 year low point, another jump down. We went to less than 85,000 for a couple of days on the average price. It's 88,500 for the sellers and 84,000 for the buyers. 84k below 85,000 on this chart right here. You could consider buying. Of course, nobody wants to catch a falling knife, but even historically speaking, this is really cheap for robotics. The one warning that I'm going to give you guys is that in the last couple of months, even in the whole year, the volatility in robotics just hasn't been there. But of course, now we've clearly broken through the low end of the barrier. We're at a 1 year low point. You can buy these for less than 85k. Perhaps volatility is going to come back all of a sudden in this market, of course. Self-harmonizing power cores also slight uptrend away from 2 million ISK, not something I'd expect. Volumes are dropping pretty quickly, 2.2 million almost for the sellers and above 2.1 million for the buyers. Buyers and sellers here feel decently well balanced, and so here again maybe some more purchasing, some expectations that these will go up in price. Maybe someone from the CSM leaked something. By the way, those guys are in Iceland as well. I don't think so, but who knows? It's clearly starting to become a pattern in the advanced PI materials. Tinfoil hat moment over. Let's move on to the superconductors. One of the refined PI materials that I make that I'm trying to sell at a good price at the moment, and that is being counter to the entire move we've seen in most refined PI materials. We obviously also had that fall slump, and even in the winter we didn't really recover 10,000 ISK at the lower end of the trade range. But look at that comeback in the last couple of months and weeks. We went up to almost 14,000 ISK. We're still at 13,300 ISK for the sellers, 12,300 ISK almost for the buyers. So that's a normal margin. It's slightly better in supply demand, but we do see a bit of a lack of demand. But the price is back to a slightly above average price. So that is a surprise that I can't really place, but this has been a pretty good time to try and sell some of these superconductors. Test cultures next. After hesitating and being under pressure for quite a little bit, it's getting well below 10,000 ISK in late February, is shooting up all of a sudden. Here I'm again going to have to say that there is some gambling happening with advanced PI materials, because test cultures is also, I'm not sure if you were there for it, but when citadels were first the industry structures together with all of these advanced PI materials that shot up in price substantially because of course they were part of the construction cycle. Test cultures rose as well. So I'm basically it's very likely that you need test cultures in order to get into those advanced PI materials for some reason. 13,400 ISK for the sellers, that is pretty high. 14,500 for the next one, that's going to be close to a 1-year high point. Yep, no doubt about that. And then the buyers are up to 12,000 ISK as well, showing very strong demand suddenly for these test cultures. There is some gambling happening in the PI market. I did not expect that, but it makes sense in the last couple of weeks. In fact, in the last couple of months, I've been hammering on the fact that I'm seeing low demand, I'm seeing low prices, I'm seeing opportunities from time to time, but you have to risk them, of course. And now people are apparently taking those positions. We can also see in wet mainframes, January high point at 2.5 million. We went to 2.4 million on 2 other occasions. Right now, we're recovering from that, but yeah, 2.2 million would be around average, and we're at 2.3 million for the sellers and just below 2.2 million for the buyers. So here again, with mainframes is still, despite the fact that we've been recovering from a high point, we're still above average on the price there as well. So who knows? It's going to be interesting to see if CCP announces something around new structures. Next up, the advanced moon materials coming in at 3050. Like that, let's start as always with the carbonite materials. Here is the crystalline for Galente ship production, staying above 150. I feel like this is a pretty decent performance. 155 for the sellers, 144 for the buyers, and apparently sellers are able to dictate these prices quite well. So we're staying above average, decently strong performance with some volatility as well that might have hidden a couple of trade opportunities. For the Fernite carbide chart, we are able to get back to 140 around the average for the year. It's in fact 144 for the sellers and 138 for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin right around our average. So this is okay to sell if you manage to buy very low, and if you want to hold out for a better price, well, you can definitely do so. 150, 160 is definitely possible on this chart, but an average price is definitely not a sign of a real problem. After that, we have our titanium carbide. This one is actually at the low end of the chart, staying at around that 175 range. 174 for the sellers, 170 for the buyers. Again, really narrow margin, but this one is obviously not trading at its average potential. Then we've got tungsten carbide here that went up to 225 and is now paying the price for that again. So here we're seeing that volatility as well in tungsten carbide, going from 170 for the sellers to 163 for the buyers. 163 on the chart, look at that. That's pretty damn low. And then you can see that just a couple of weeks ago we were selling this for above 200 ISK. Again, that volatility does have some trade potential, but it's going to be decently difficult to materialize because it does go very quickly. After that, our metamaterials, photonics, are really low, staying below 15,000 for a couple of days. Buyers are at 13,500. For a couple of Eve talks, I should say, I've been looking at this for a potential buy, and I still think that you can do so. 13,500 is going to be over here somewhere. Looking at the entire chart, looking at the potential for metamaterials, that to me feels like a pretty decent purchase if you can grab it at that price, of course. Plasmonic metamaterials much better, right? 21,000 on the average chart range, 21,000 for the sellers, 20,000 for the buyers. Not bad. Again, showing that sellers are able to demand the price that they want for a lot of these materials. For the non-linears, then we are clearly below average, going back to less than 22,000. But this again should put that photonic metamaterial range in a different light, right? Less than 15k for the sellers, 13,500 for the buyers, and then this one is at the low end with 22,000 ISK for the sellers almost, and less than 20,000 for the buyers. Decently lower margin, so obviously we are still under pressure. We're a bit oversupplied, but the price compared to the photonics is of course quite a bit higher. Now we got terahertz metamaterials, same thing, very stable right now. above 20k, but that is not that great for terahertz metamaterials. 21,000 for the sellers, 20,300 for the buyers. Now we got some other stuff. Let's see if we can find some patterns or anything that's pretty interesting. Fermionic condensates did jump up substantially last week, but is already back down to that 90,000 disk. Average range 94 for the sellers, 88 for the buyers. Yep, right on that 90,000, which we've seen basically since the Nelsec blackout. After that, we've got ferrogel that is slowly recovering in 1, 2, 3 steps now, getting back to that 45k range. It's still 41,000 for the sellers, but we're slowly getting there right now. We are going back down. Let's see if we can manage a third jump to get back to an average range. A fourth jump, excuse me. Fullerite is staying above 1000 disk, but not by much. This is really a pretty narrow trade range for Fullerite. It's very difficult to make some good trades in that one. Hypersynaptic fibers, 1 year low points, 10,000 disk on some days. We're talking 11,150 for the sellers, less than 10,000 disk for the buyers at 9,650. That is pretty cheap, definitely below the entire chart. Something that you could look into, potential upswing, 14,000 disk. That is not so bad, 50% pretty much. Nano transistor is actually doing well again, going back up towards that 6,000 disk range, 5,900 for the sellers, 5,700 for the buyers, forced up substantially as well, trading well above average. And this time it is not, well, there's not that much supply, but it doesn't feel like we're in a drought either just yet. Phenolic composites, really strong performance in the whole winter here. 2,125, pretty easily defended. It doesn't last forever, of course. We're back to a slightly below average price, I would say 1,900 disk for the sellers, 1,830 for the buyers. So this was your time to sell, of course. Low points, yeah, 1,600-ish is sometimes doable, so still too early to sell in my opinion. Then we've got the ceramic fibers to end with. Definitely struggling as well, staying well below average. 350 on the chart, 356 for the 7 for the sellers, and 355 for the buyers. Pretty cheap, also something you could look into for a medium to longer term investment. Alright, let's see if there's an impact on the Tech 2 ship market then, coming in at 36.30. Like that, and let's get started. Of course, the Aries last week I think was under pressure. Yep, or was it already moving up? It should have, but not by too much. Alright, so low point was 25 million. Right now, look at that, data points at 32.5 million. It's in fact 34.5 for the sellers, 25.6 for the buyers. So around 10 days ago, around 2 weeks ago on this slump, we could have bought and we could right now have been making quite a bit of risk. A surprise volatility for me because the interceptors haven't shown that pattern as well as some of the other ship classes, but it's there. January, lovely spike up to 35, and we are now in March, just less than 2 months later, and we're back close to 35 million for the sellers with, well, a buy opportunity, obviously well below 25 million on the buy side of things. Impressive stuff, not what I expected. The Basilisk is doing the exact opposite, going for a 1 year low point, well away from the 200 million on the average price. That starts to look really interesting as well. 186 million for the sellers, 181 for the buyers. And despite the fact that we don't see that many buyers here, that's kind of strange. So you are able to buy very close to 180 million ISK. Not bad if I look at this chart, definitely something to look into on my next JITA trip. Pretty obvious if we look at this chart. After that, we've got the Cerberus. Unfortunately, we don't get a third trade just yet. So if you guys follow Eve Talk, you know that if we look at my, is it my ticker? Yep, I've been buying Cerbri for like 195. And is it in the trades made that I still have it here as well? No, I think I removed it from here. But then I managed to sell them for like 250 plus, I think, on both occasions. So not even the best sell prices, but I did ride these two volatility waves. Unfortunately, here I bought on the third dip, and now you can see that we're struggling to create a third wave. So it's up to 217 million, so I could try and sell at a slight profit. It's still 196.6 million for the buyers. So personally, I'm going to wait for a better opportunity to sell my Cerberus again for 250 or more if I can. My third trade being my best would be the of course a lovely situation, but yeah, sometimes you need patience as well, and sometimes the pattern can repeat itself very quickly. This is the volatility, of course, that we're looking for in the take-to-ship market, and then that's what we're hoping for the basilisk. Next up, we've got the Crow, another surprise, and it's another interceptor. Massive increase up to 40 million ISK, really 1 year high point. The landing place here was 27.5 million, so the Crow is definitely commanding a premium when it comes to the interceptor market. 41.5 for the sellers, 32.3 for the buyers. Massive sell opportunity. This will get plugged by production pretty quickly, but yeah, if you did manage to buy close to 27.5 million at the lower end, which has now been the lower end 1, 2, 3 times in the last half year, and here as well, and here we did break through that, so waiting for 25 million looks like that's not the case, but gross 27.5 million on the chart. Look for the low buy prices. Sounds very interesting, and yeah, 1, 2, these are not that great, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pretty pronounced sharp rises in the price as well. That is of course full of trade potential, and this one is kind of crazy. 41.4 million for something that you could have bought for around 27 million. Very nice profit margin. So Aries up, Crow up. Curious to see what the others will do. Next up here we get the Guardian. That one also showing promising volatility. Unfortunately right now we're landing on 230. Apparently on the chart it's 240 for the sellers, 240 million, and 204 million for the buyers. The buyers are definitely able to stay pretty low. They don't feel that pressure too often, but yeah, for Guardians 190, maybe even 180 on the buy prices is what I'm personally looking for. So here your sell opportunity was probably 10 days, about 2 weeks ago. Right now we are not exactly where we want to sell or buy at. After that we've got the Hawk assault frigate, something that was requested, I think because it's really popular in the Abyss. Lovely spike as well, up to 60 million. Unfortunately the only pronounced spike of the year here, or at least the last 10 months or so. And then 35 million, we've been landing on that before. It's 37 million for the sellers, 32.2 million for the buyers. Slightly more stable market. We do dip to 30 million at some point. So yeah, if you want to gamble on the Hawk, I would wait for this pattern to repeat itself so you can buy these for 30 million or less, and then of course wait for a lovely sell opportunity, which may take a long time. This to me feels like a longer term gamble. The Heretic, that was a really interesting story as well with these interdictors. We were following two of them, the Saber and the Heretic. I don't like them for active trading because the volumes just aren't there, and you do see this massive rise over January, and up to mid-February here, from 60 million all the way up to like 90 million is almost on the chart. It looks like that's an incredible opportunity. Of course it really was not. It was on a complete lack of supply. Everything dried up in the Heretic market that this rise happened, and then you can see how quickly this gap gets plugged. Now we see supply coming in. We're already back down to 65 million for the sellers, and there's still 270 units of them being sold as one of the most competing orders, 42 for the last one as well. We're at 56.1 million for the buyers. This is basically for me a ghost spike, where basically it would have been next to impossible for you to actually materialize this trade because of the terrible volumes. I still hold to my theory that if we're gonna see some real volatility and opportunity in the interdictors, there's gonna have to be a CCP intervention in the ship, a rebalancing of the ships, because if you're there's trading days where you're selling 6 or 7 Tech 2 interdictors, then that is, I mean, that's just not enough to keep this market alive. For stuff like the Hound, for instance, you can see here that's a pattern we're looking for. 35 million, 1, 2, 3, 4 times over the last year, a couple of 30 million pluses as well, and then dips to 25 and below, in fact 22.5 as well on several occasions. This is the volatility, and at least we're trading around 100 a day. Now on bad days you've got 30, 40, it's not 5 or 6 so that is still a pretty major difference. The Hound right now is under pressure, but yeah, we're looking for buyers below 25 million. We're there. Look at the lack of demand. 27 million for the sellers, 281 here, 26 here, 13 here. Clearly we're still massively supplied. Buyers are drying up. 24 million for those buyers. It is potentially doable. If you want perspective, my successful Hound trades have been purchasing at 22 million though. That was much more pronounced on a couple of these dips here. So yeah, you might be a little bit early. On the other hand, you can clearly see the potential upswings. 35, 30 million, easily doable. 24 to 30 plus is not that bad. Next up, we've got the Ishtar that is continuing to move very healthily in the 230 to 250 million range. Not that much to say. 244 for the sellers and 223 for the buyers. I would wait for a real trend break before I would decide on doing something with the Ishtar. After that, we've got the Manticore, reached 35 million as well. A little bit less clear volatility in the Manticore, but the opportunity that was really noticeable when we went to like 22 million. I think I bought 5 of those as well, and then sold them here for like 29 or 30 million. It can happen right now. Unfortunately, we're still above 30 million on average, 32.6 for the sellers, 29 for the buyers. Yeah, that's not where you want to be stepping into the Manticore market. It has that same potential. It just doesn't have that lovely wavy pattern that we see, for instance, in the Hound. The Munin is shooting up all of a sudden. Maybe some Nulsec action is bringing the Munin back for some replacement fleets. Clearly see a volume uptick. 282.4 million for the sellers, 226 for the buyers. Buyers are not budging, so this is just a massive increase in margin between sellers and buyers. Look at the volumes all of a sudden. Alright, surprise opportunity. Could have bought this for 230 a couple of weeks ago, sell them for 280. There's definitely a trade there, but you're dependent on something happening in Nulsec for this pattern to materialize. It's much less so with the stealth bombers, for instance, which were Bombers Bar and lots of other players, myself included in the current war deck, do love to fly. So the Nemesis had that same volatility where I made a couple trades buying for like 21 million, I think it was, for the Nemesis. Right now, unfortunately, that volatility is not showing up. We're very stable above 25 million, 26.6 for the sellers and 23.7 for the buyers. Yeah, again, don't really like it. We would need to see a bit of more oversupply. What's that looking like? Yeah, nope, it's not there, not in the hundreds of Nemesis being brought to the market. Or is it Nemesises? Not exactly sure. Anyways, we're not oversupplied here, so it's too early to jump back in on this one. Then we've got the Oneros that went to 210 on average, is now crashing back down apparently. If we look at these latest daily averages, sellers are coming in at 214, buyers at 182. 214, let's see, that's still respectable. So that should mean, but again, look at the volumes, it's a bit of a gamble, but it should mean that there are people dumping Oneroses for that 183 million range. If you look at that on the chart, 183 million, that is a great purchase. The potential is pretty high. In fact, you could try to buy these and then try to sell them right away and get a profit. But the volumes just aren't there. Very difficult trade to make. But this is a surprise. Look at just over the last like 7 days, the spread between the daily averages going from 222 million all the way down to 180. It's pretty obvious in the last couple of days that we have seen some Oneros dumping straight to that. Next up here we get the Purifier. First half of the year much better in its wavy pattern. Then it did go to a very substantial 1 year low point where I also made one Purifier trade. Right now though we're landing on 30 million. We're breaking straight through that. 29.9 for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. 213, 46, 42. That's a lot better than the Nemesis. Of course, gonna put even more pressure on the price. 26 million. And we're getting closer to that 25 million. I think if for a no-brain buy, if we get below that 25 million, which is still quite a few of these orders to fill, that is where I would definitely look into jumping in. And then the Saber, part of the very interesting, but unfortunately not actively traded in for me personally, interdictor market. If you get that heretic pattern, look at that price go up here very substantially. Just nobody was bringing any heretics to the market, and we went up to like maybe 4 sell orders or something like that, something crazy. And then in the Saber we had the exact opposite. We went up to 72.5 million. You can see this decline in price to a low point of 62.5 million, and that was just a massive oversupply, and it is still very much there. 65.9 million for the sellers, 274 here, 50 here, 49 here. There's just a lot of ships. 58 million for the buyers. That margin has narrowed. on some of these real dips when you could like try and buy these for 55 million and things like that. I've been trying to grab some of these interdictors. Same with the Heretic. Been very aggressive trying to grab them well below the entire chart. I just have not succeeded. The volumes are unfortunately not there. Despite the fact that the Sabre is doing a lot better, getting close to 200 trades a day, it is very, very difficult in the current market to actually make trades happen in the interdictor markets. Of that, we've got the Scimitar that is staying well above 200 million, so I would say no on trading here. 205, 1985, really narrow margin as well. And finally, the Zarmas, to keep getting a feeling of the Triglavian ship market, is very stable, just below 300 million ISK. Yep, 299, 999, 987.99. Those days will be over pretty soon as well. We'll be talking 299 and then on 4 numbers, so keep in mind that is going to be a substantial change in the competition behavior here as well. And then 275 million for the buyers. It is probably going to be a pretty powerful ship, but I don't expect too much volatility at this point for the Triglavian ships or any real opportunities. All right, Tech 3 ship market next, coming in at 50 minutes. And first some water. And there we go. Let's see what's happening here. So last week we saw that the Confessor broke out, which we were hoping was going to help bring everyone at least to 40 million, if not better. We are declining at the tail end, but we're staying well above 40 million ISK on average. 44 million for the sellers, 40 million for the buyers. And then here, of course, the pattern that we can expect in the last 24 hours. Full page with 77, 21, 16. Obviously, we're still trading at a really good price, and so a bit more supply is not a surprise. The Hecate was still flat above 40 million, so here we should see a decently well-rounded supply. Unfortunately, that's bad news. The last 24 hours here, 270 units being brought in at 41.2 million, so that's definitely still a great price. Buyers at 36 million, but this, and then the 129 right here, this is going to put a little pressure on the Hecate market as well. Then we had the Jackdaw that went up to like 70 million and stayed there for quite a couple of weeks above 60. Was very, very impressive. And here we now have 42.4 million for the sellers, 39 million for the buyers. And this was more what I was expecting for the Hecate, which had a really flat price here. Why would you bring 270 Hecates on a market when you could potentially try to go still for the Jackdaws or the Confessors at 44 million. It's kind of strange that you would flood the market at this point, but alright, that's what's happening. The Jackdaw, 42 million for the sellers, 39 million for the buyers. What did happen, all of them are now selling well above 40 million ISK. Unfortunately, the Hecate, that's a bad first sign. That is a little bit much for the market. We'll see if this can be absorbed. Otherwise, if this then starts to ripple through, I'm fully expecting that 40 million, that average price that I've always been looking for, since we've been seeing this lovely interaction between all of these tactical destroyers. That's where we'll end up yet again. Then we've got this Vapel here that is staying below 40 million ISK. We're talking 38 million for the sellers, 34 million for the buyers, but you can clearly see that the supply pattern here is completely different. 2 sell orders in the last 24 hours, 10 and 27, a little bit higher than I expected, but look at everything below that. 1, 2, 8, lots of 1s, 10s, 13. That's completely different from the others. So I do think that if these guys can maintain that price and not be flooded with supply and stay well above 40 million ISK, we'll meet all across the board at around 40 million on average. And then of course, again, anything with big Nosek purchases like here could start the whole dynamic again. So Svepel, what are these buying at? 34.5 million. I still say that has been going up as well, I think, on the buy prices. This is still pretty low. If my prediction comes true and we see some upward pressure on this Vapel without flooding of these 3 destroyers here, and they managed to stay above 40 million ISK, then that could still be a pretty good purchase where you could try to sell those vehicles for close to 40 million ISK at some point. Now in the cruiser markets, from the ticker you may have seen that something is happening as well. The Tengu went up substantially, 20% or something like that. Yeah, there it is, 20.65%. Well, look at the Legion, massive breakout here as well, getting very close to 1 year high point. Not just yet, we went above 190. We're at 184 million for the sellers, 167.5 million for the buyers. We should have bought, but I never dared to pull the trigger myself, but this is quite substantial. The Loki was already at a high point, and yep, is getting even higher now, 300 million plus, 345 million for the sellers, 308 for the buyers. Volume wise, we're not seeing that much, right? We're not seeing anything that crazy. Let's take a quick look at approaches as well. Well, trying to break out. The least popular Tech 3 cruiser is not doing so that successfully, but we're still talking 164, 165 million for the sellers, 136 million for the buyers. And then the Tengu, that's a breakout, that's a 1 year high point, of course, 222 million for the sellers, 185 million for the buyers. A surprise breakout across the board in the strategic cruiser market. Are people gambling on changes to these ships? That's a possibility. Considering the volumes, that would pretty much be my gamble. If you know that it's actually nullsec action, that's entirely possible as well, of course. Just a bit of purchasing, considering the low volumes that we've been seeing in the last couple of weeks and months in the Tech 3 cruiser markets, can have this effect. And that's always what I've been both dreading and, of course, seeing the potential of. It remained a really big gamble, of course. Is that the tactical strategic cruiser market is small enough that just, 100 chips can make a huge difference in the price and can bring us 1 year high points here. Pretty much never before seen price. I think 350 million ISK for a Loki. That is very, very expensive all of a sudden. It just happened. I don't have the exact explanation myself, but it is very, very impressive. If you did take those gambles, if you did buy Lokis for less than 200 million, if you bought Legions for less than 150, close to 140, maybe even less than that, and if you bought these Tengus, their low end was less than 150 as well, well, you've got a massive, massive sell opportunity with really, really big margins. And I applaud your bravery if you jumped in on those, because for me, that never felt certain. This might even be manipulation as well. That could crash down very quickly, but we'll see in the upcoming weeks how the Tech 3 cruiser market evolves. It is definitely unexpected for me, but super interesting. And then finally, we have the extra product for this week coming in at 5620. Like that. And well, we're gonna take a look at the faction cruisers again, see what we can see there. We got new skins for the Gila. Is that one still very expensive compared to the other pirate faction cruisers? I'm kind of curious about that. It's been a long time since I actually flew the Gila myself, went into the abyss myself. We can see the Ashimu, for instance, 1 year low point, getting towards 50 million ISK on the chart. It's 52 million for the sellers, 48 million, and then 47 million for the buyers. This is definitely buying below the entire chart. Interesting jumping point, I think, if you want to gamble on an Ashimu. Next up, we have the Cinnabal. That is also under pressure, not doing that badly. Not at 130 million just yet, but we are talking 142 million for the sellers and 127.5. Yeah, that is actually really low for the Cinnabal as well. Potentially you get some cheap Cinnabals that are pretty close to the low end, the bottom of the chart here as well on the buy prices. Bit of surprise to see such a massive margin. Ortrus next, that one is commanding a nice premium, complete reverse situation, of course, 230 million, well above average. It's 242 for the sellers, 222 and then 217 for the buyers. Also, really big margin between sellers and buyers here. Phantasm next, slightly under pressure, 80 million, slightly below average here, 82 million for the sellers and 72 million for the buyers. That's also pretty decent margin, 72 million, that's just right here, that's pretty low as well. Stradios, bit of a late bump, bit of surprise here, 180 million, and then we're recovering from that. That's a lovely spike, but just a one wave over the course of 1 year. Not that great to trade in. 166 million for the sellers, 153 for the buyers. Difficult to really take a position on this one for me personally. Great ship, of course, alpha clone friendly, covered ups, all of that stuff. Incredible exploration ship. Not the highest potential, but just all around an incredible ship. So right now I would say 166, slightly expensive, but still very affordable. Then here is the Gila, still really expensive. I think it really stands out across all of these pirate faction cruisers that this one is very expensive, very popular. At the tail end we're dropping back down a little bit, but keep in mind we come from a high point of above 230 million ISK. It's 216 for the sellers and just below 200 million for the buyers, for of course one of the strongest PvE platforms for its size in the game. So fully understandable. Incredible abyss ship, of course, and it is noticeable. So a Gila BPC is one of the best drops you can hunt for. And then after that we get the Vigilant, that's also going up to a slightly above average price, but yeah, the range is completely different. It's on a lack of supply, 184 million for the sellers, 166 for the buyers. So this is why is it a bit more expensive? That's pretty obvious. For the Gila, it's very expensive. It's also very available. So there's lots of people hunting for those Gila BPCs, but they're definitely making the right choice considering the price of the ship. Now we get the Navy faction cruisers next. Let's take a look at these and see if we can spot some patterns. That's a pattern. Good God, Augur Navy issue, a Mar faction, a massive shot up here from 40-ish million to 60 million on the average price. It's 69 million for the sellers, 45 million still for the buyers. That's a huge margin. Look at the supply here. It's not going to last for very long, but that's a very sharp increase in price. Definitely tradable if you have some cheap Augur Navy issues, or if you still have some cheap loyalty points from the Mar faction lying around. It could be worth it to try and bring these to the market very quickly. Very big surprise here. Caracal Navy issue, a slow trend up for like the last 5 months or so, but really an impressive difference as well. Started at 37.5 million and is now selling for 74.4 million. I think I still have a Caracal Navy issue that I could sell for a very good price. So I used that as an exploration platform for a little bit. I bought it when it was really cheap. Yeah, I could double my money on that one. Very impressive, 59 million as well. And so this should indicate more expensive LP for Caldari and Amar. It's the first time that we really see this pattern all of a sudden being quite substantial. Let's see if their opponents then show that decrease in price. Here is the Augur Navy issue. Well, it's definitely decreasing at the tail end here, but it's showing a little bit too much volatility to really see the pattern. Right now we're talking less than 60 million for the sellers and 42 million for the buyers. That's still a really big margin, to be honest. So this should still move down or stay down if we're getting a clear trend here. Then the Omen Navy issue, a Mar faction, you would expect this to also be going up. It is a very slight upswing, but really nothing to indicate more expensive LP. Very big surprise here, 44 million for the sellers, 41 million for the buyers. If you want to gamble on this becoming a wave, then of course the Omen Navy issue, you should be jumping in on that opportunity. Osprey Navy issue went up a couple months ago, but is now pretty stable at 50. In fact, sellers coming in at 47 million ISK. So here we're not seeing the pattern confirmed. It's kind of weird. Like over the last couple of years, this was a really noticeable pattern, and it is being disrupted massively lately. Here's the Side Navy issue. Are we seeing a clear cheapening of the Minmatar LP? I'm not seeing it, honestly. This is also relatively cheap, 44 million. Look at the availability, 36 million for the buyers. Not that great. Stabber Fleet issue then, nope, not seeing that. And then Vexor Navy issue, that one could be, Jesus Christ, no. Again, no, bit of a bump up, actually really cheap still. 47 million for the sellers and 42.3 million for the buyers. So from my perspective, it is a lot harder at the moment to just grab a Navy faction ship class and then see, all right, this is what's been happening in faction warfare. There is, of course, still trade potential. Augur Navy issue, definitely a great time to sell. Caracal Navy issue, very nice upswing here, which you know, just 6 months ago or so, you could have bought these for half the price. That was not bad at all. But the others, far more jittery, counter to the pattern. Very weird stuff at the moment. I don't have a good explanation for it, but it feels like it's a lot more chaotic, which makes it far less predictable. And yeah, difficult to actually decide on making trades, because I also don't see like sustained and very noticeable 1 year low points or anything like that. We saw that here in the Caracal Navy issue, but that is really it. So we'll keep doing our homework when it comes to these faction warfare potential trades, but right now, yeah, the pattern seems to be lost to me personally. And I'm not sure why. Anyways, that's it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.